The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to another edition of K4Wins. K, the number 4 wins. Go to K4Wins.com. Free site. Get all of our plays up there. Also become a subscriber. K4Wins.com is fantastic. We've changed things around. I know Kai's been working on that website, and it's getting bigger and better by the minute. So make sure you check out K4Wins.com. He is Kai Gregory up in the upper left-hand corner. Of course, the guy has been on both sides of the gambling world for many, many years, knows exactly what he's doing. We talk about handicapping down the bottom third. We're talking about Kip Keefer, executive director of the Birmingham Racecourse and Casino. Big horse guy. We got the Derby coming up. I'm looking forward to it. K4 Wins. We do it all, man. We had a soccer bet last night. I cannot wait to hear some of your great plays and the Triple Crown. And I know the Case, your son, who's out in Las Vegas, chief editor of the Las Vegas Sun, he's all over horse racing as well. So I cannot wait to get the bottom half in the horse racing. I lived in Louisville for 3.5 years. I'm from Cincinnati, so I'm into the thoroughbreds as well. So super excited about that coming up as well. You guys doing okay?
All good.
All right, fantastic. Before we get into basketball at a monster weekend in the SEC, Kip, you had a great stat about college game day going to teams 1 versus number 2. What was that stat you had on the starting lineup?
This is the first time. I don't know exactly when they started game day for basketball, but it was somewhere in the early 2000s, maybe 2005 or so. This is only the second time ever they've had a number 1 versus number 2 matchup for college game day. The first one has a commonality to this one. It was in 2008. It was a confrontation between Memphis, number 1 at the time, and Tennessee, coached by Bruce Pearl. Mm-hmm. So it's the first time since 2008. That is a hell of a long time. That's 17 years ago. So this is a very unusual, just to have a 1 versus 2 matchup during the regular season is unusual enough. So this thing is,
and another
is just
in-state game also.
Yeah. Conference in state. I mean, all the this is really unprecedented territory for sure.
For some reason, I remember I've heard so many great stats and great trivia questions about Bruce Pearl. But wasn't it Bruce Pearl who knocked off Alabama in the big dance when he was at UW Milwaukee?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, because I remember that game. I remember Alabama being a big favorite.
That put him on the map.
Yeah, they were like, who the hell is this Bruce Pearl guy at UW Milwaukee? And I remember them knocking off Alabama. So this guy's been part of everything. Case, before we move on, we had an interesting email here. It does seem through March Madness that whoever's got the great hot point guard usually goes the furthest. Would you not agree? It seems like one guy really gets hot, and obviously the point guard's touching the basketball every time they go down the court. If you've got that play, all the guys always say, listen, you got great point guard play, you have a shot to go deep, correct?
I mean, it's certainly important. I think sometimes that we add a little too much importance to it. You want a great point guard, of course, but I feel like it's kind of confirmation bias with some of the teams. We say, oh, they had a great point guard, they won. I think college basketball has always been ruled by the big men. And think about the teams that have won recently. I mean, UConn had Karaman, Adama Sanogo. Now, of course, I'm blanking on winners before that. I shouldn't. But I'm just telling you, line-wise and stuff, having a dominant big man is going to move a line a lot more than a great point guard. As important as a point guard is, I would put a point guard number 2. And the great thing is, if you really believe that, if you believe you can pinpoint the point guard that can take their team every way, and you think the market is undervaluing them, you can ride them all the way and bet them. So I don't mean to minimize it. I just think college basketball is big men led. It's always been big men led, and that's where you're going to see the biggest effect in the betting market.
And info Tony Kurre Radio, info TonyKurreRadio.net. This is where this email question is coming from. Bob in Knoxville wants to know what is the biggest line mover in Vegas? Is it when a point guard goes out? Is it when a starting pitcher goes out? Or when a quarterback is gone for an NFL team? We were talking about home court and home field advantages on the starting lineup yesterday. And obviously that bodes really, really well for the SEC right now. I think the SEC, when it comes to home court advantage, is probably more so than any other league right now or any other conference. It's just really, really hard. That's why you see games like Alabama favored only by 5 against Texas on the road, and they end up winning by double digits. But what would you say is the biggest line mover in any of the sports?
Yeah, if we're trying to just make it as basic as we can, obviously it's all depends on the situation. It depends on who's coming in after. That's the biggest thing that I think people don't factor when they make these generalizations is it really depends on who's the backup. But if we're just boiling it down to average, biggest line move, I think without a doubt, number one on average, it's pitchers. I mean, a pitcher can have like it can be such a huge difference when you go from like an ace to a guy that gets thrown in at the last minute. So I think that's number one, and quarterback certainly number two. These really good quarterbacks, you can move a little bit more than a touchdown if like a Patrick Mahomes is out or a Lamar Jackson, et cetera. So I would put those two in a tier of their own. Then goalies and hockey are important. And basketball, I feel like in the NBA, I know I just talked about how important the big man is in college basketball. I think the NBA, it's a lot less position specific. It's just these heliocentric stars that have such high usage rates and are their whole team. NBA, you can kind of pick and choose. There's probably about 6 or 7 guys that are on that level of not quite to the quarterback level, but probably in the third if you're talking about like the Shai Gilgeous-Alexanders or Nikola Jokic's or Luka Doncic, surprisingly, with recent events. But so it'd be pitcher, quarterback for me, and then the rest kind of fall in behind there.
And what sport has the most dominant home field advantage?
College basketball.
College basketball. Yeah. And hockey, does the hockey play into that as well?
Hockey, a little bit. Hockey, it's I feel like just with 82 games and a college basketball, like everyone's schedule is pretty uniform. I mean, you might have like a 1 or 2 rest day difference, but hockey, it's just so much about how many miles are you traveling? Are you going on a back-to-back? There's just a lot more situational that comes into it. But college basketball is certainly the biggest. Although I do think the college basketball home court edge across the whole sport is down a little kind of significantly this year. I know it sounds weird when you were just talking up the SEC's home court, and I agree. Home court has been huge in the SEC this year. It's kind of what we saw in the Big Ten the last couple of years was the league where it seemed like the home team won every single game. Now, especially early in the year, was the SEC. But some of these other conferences, you're seeing away teams like crush it from an against the spread perspective. So, market gets more efficient over time. And I do feel like home court is being added in pretty good. But college basketball, for many years, you ask any statistician, they'd say it has the best home field advantage, even better than college football, which I think some people would say.
Kip, you've been all over the SEC too when it comes to college hoops this year, and you always talk about people always talk about diluting the main season. That's why Major League Baseball season is too long. Does the regular season mean still so much? This year, I can never remember. Maybe it's because the SEC is so hot. There are so many great basketball games every stinking weekend. Maybe it's because we just got off of college football, and there's usually a couple of weekends in college football where there's not even a top 25 matchup. Now it seems like there's 10 or 15 every single Saturday. When you're talking about perhaps adding 8 to 10 teams for next season, and I was talking to Mark Ingram, the UAB athletic director, yesterday. He sees no reason why they will not double the field from 68 to 142, whatever 68 times 2 is, by 2027. And only because right now roughly like 18% of the league is getting in college football, more than half of the teams are getting to go in a bowl. And certainly with a 12-team playoff, more teams are getting a chance to play for a national championship. But will that do anything to it just seems like it's almost too good to be true for me right now, because do these games mean as much? Because it seems like Duke and North Carolina was always such a special game, and now there's special games every night.
Yeah, the basketball regular season is such a different animal, especially what we just experienced with football, where in basketball, you just load your schedule up. If you're really a serious contender, you load your schedule up with serious contenders to start the year. If you look at some of the schedules that Kansas and Duke and Kentucky play, it's just absurd. So, it's no big deal if you take some lumps along the way and you have 7 or 8 or 10 losses. But I think you develop in this kind of hostile environment. Case mentioned the Big Ten, which has been a good example in recent years of being kind of a rugged undertaking to get through that schedule. The SEC is doing that this year big time, because when your league is 10 or 12 teams deep to start with, and even the bottom 4 are still tests on the road. I mean, there's no breather really in the entire league. I mean, it would be an interesting discussion to talk about. I guess LSU's the worst team in the league. That's who I would nominate anyway. followed maybe by Oklahoma. It's hard to believe that these are the big name schools we're talking about, but I don't think any trip to Baton Rouge or Norman is a routine slam dunk win. So yeah, I think it really prepares you for the rigors of the tournament because you're really facing a big challenge every night. And if you slack up, look at Alabama last Saturday or whatever, they were up. They had a 3-pointer to go up 22 with 7 minutes left and missed it. Next thing you know, Arkansas is back to only down 3, and it went right down to the wire. So I think this kind of situation, although it has nothing to do really with postseason rankings or where you're placed. I mean, you're still getting into the big dance, and that's the goal. But I think this is a great preparatory situation for these teams to go through the rigors of this kind of schedule.
I will agree with you, and I'll say this. I know you mentioned it being 22 and then almost only up by 3. Thank God for the shot clock. I can remember those days back in the 70s and 80s where they played throwdown ball, be 19-17, with a minute left in the basketball. I remember seeing UC pull that off a couple times against my Xavier Musketeers. They'd win that way. Wimp Sanderson used to be was known for cream puffs, man. He would load up the beginning of the season. Every year, Alabama was 11-0. I mean, they would play the worst teams in the world because he's like, I wanted to find out what my team was all about. I wanted to generate that chemistry before we got into conference play. Obviously, you're not seeing that now. You're having coaches versus cancer, these Malibu things. You're having all these wonderful, wonderful tournaments. I love it. I mean, right out of the box, you're doing that. But Kyle, I'll ask you, if in fact we do double the field, I think it's going to happen within a couple of years. Are you going to see more teams add more cream puffs so they can go ahead and bolster the record? Because I think like a 31-2 Manhattan who didn't get in a couple of years ago will definitely get into the double the field because I think a team like that is deserving to get in if you want to lose 4 games in your entire season. Or do you think they're just going to continue to load up? Because what people don't realize is Coleman Coliseum is packed. And you just brought it up, Kip. Tickets were $750 for the game against Auburn this weekend. I can't remember.
And believe me, a cheap seat at Coleman, it sucks. I mean, not only is it high, that arena, if you can see my hands, it's built like this. It's built out. So if you've got a high seat, like in the corner or something, I mean, I remember Case and Clayton and I went to when Simmons was going to be the next great superstar. How did that work out from LSU? We went to see Simmons against Alabama when Case was in town one time. Our seats absolutely sucked at that game. Alabama is such a big time program. I'm glad you gave me this opportunity to make this quick rant. Build a freaking arena, Alabama. My God, every other team, the crappy teams have these state-of-the-art arenas. Coleman Coliseum is the biggest, draftiest piece of crap barn in the country for basketball. And if this program is going to play at this level, build a freaking arena.
Well, how long is Auburn's, I say a new arena because it's not new. Has it been 12, 13, 14 years?
I don't think it's been that long. I'd say 8 or 9, maybe. I'm not sure.
Was Lebo there at the time? I think Leboland. But I mean, when they built that thing, man, it automatically added a resurgence of fanhood. And obviously, you have to build a winner. You have to bring a winner.
And it's state of the art. We're watching Alabama, Texas Saturday night. Texas has a fantastic arena. It's relatively new. I just can't how can Alabama justify completely redoing the whole campus, but they're still playing in crappy Coleman Coliseum?
I'll agree with you. Kai, talk about that. If we double it up, more teams going soft schedule, we're still going to continue to see these tough ones right now. It's pretty good the way we got it.
I think it's stupid to double it up. 68 is plenty. Most of these cream puffs, I mean, oh my God, then we just have, 2 more first round games that suck. Maybe there's 2 upsets, maybe in that, but no, I mean, team 70 through team 136 don't deserve to be in. Maybe add 4. I wouldn't be interested in the first 2 rounds. I mean, granted, if I'm not betting on it, I mean, who cares? Going in, there's 10 teams. You go into the NCAA tournament. Who more than the top 10 is really going to get into the Final Four and actually win it? Why would you put 70 through 140 in who have no chance of winning? I don't care. I get that people can beat people on any given day, but you're not playing, at home. You're not going to have your little Murray State Racers, beat Alabama. It happens once every 20 years, 1 versus 16. So now you're going to have 1 versus 32. Or are you going to go 17 plays 32 and you basically have a little play-in tournament in the beginning before you get to your real 64? And I would have no interest in that whatsoever. I know that doesn't sound right. But
it makes you wonder what's going to happen to the NITs and the CBAs and all those things. By the way, Neville Court in Auburn opened 15 years ago, my friend, 2010.
Oh, God, I'm famous. I'm famous for that.
If it seems like it's a long time ago, just double it, my friend. It's
in
what
conversations, I always say, just a couple of years ago, they said, that was 2004.
I remember doing a morning show, the opening drive with Alan Jay at the opening of that thing in 2010, and just how wonderful it was. And one of the beautiful things about it, it really took care of the student section. The student section had its own commissary, had its own areas to get its own food and everything else. And it all starts with the student sections. If you have 1,000 students at every one of your football or basketball games, you got yourself something pretty special. Kai, before we get around and get some plays, and obviously college hoops, we'll do it much like we did with college football and NFL. You've got some interesting futures bets, and I'd love to get Case's thoughts on these as well. In the SEC, one interesting enough with the Florida Gators. What do you got? What'd you find?
I'm at 20-1 to win the SEC. Now, that's regular season, doesn't include the tournament. But you've got a team that's 8-3 right now, with probably the easiest schedule of the top, 6 teams. Because when that SEC tournament comes in, those top 4, top 8 seeds really matter, especially the top 4 getting that double bye. And, as we're talking about that, you get Florida, like I said, they're in third place right now in the SEC, but they have the tiebreaker over Auburn, which would be interesting if they get there. Because if you talk about the schedules that are left for these teams, Florida has South Carolina, Oklahoma, at LSU, at Georgia, Texas A&M, at Alabama, Ole Miss. They're going to be favored in all those but one, probably, against Alabama. Now, Auburn is probably going to be favored in most all of their games except this weekend, which could be a pick, but they got to go Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Texas A&M, Alabama. Alabama has to play Auburn, Missouri, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Florida, Auburn. For the top 2 teams in the conference, that's difficult. You've got number 1 versus number 2 in the country this weekend, and number 1 versus number 2 in the SEC. But how about you also have number 1 versus number 2 in the Big 12 with Houston at Arizona on Saturday. 9 top 25 road favorites, more than likely coming in. Road favorite going into this weekend. Not only a losing record against the spread, a losing record straight up.
Straight up. Yep.
So that's pretty big. And then going in and looking at some of these futures, who would have thought, and yes, I'm a Tennessee fan. I've been saying all year Tennessee was overrated. Tennessee was number 1 for 4 weeks this year. Now they're sitting in 5th place in the SEC with 5 losses, and they have Vandy at Texas A&M, at LSU, Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina left. They could very easily end up with 8 losses in the SEC, and they were number 1 in the country 4 weeks ago. Kentucky, who was, out of the top 25, then came back in, everybody was loving on them. They're 6-5 in the SEC. When's the last time Kentucky, it was a legitimate number 6 team in the SEC? And their schedule is not great going into this weekend, but they're at Texas, Vandy, at Alabama, at Oklahoma, Auburn, LSU, Missouri. How many of those games are they going to be a dog in? How many of those games can they legitimately lose? And then you've got a Missouri team who is 7-4 that can legitimately probably win and end up in the top 4. It's going to come down to, I think, Missouri, Ole Miss, Texas A&M for that 4 seed in the SEC tournament in a double bye.
K4Wins.com, K4Wins.com, free site. You can get on there and subscribe to it. Check it out. It's fantastic. We do a show every single week. We're expanding. We're going to be on some terrestrial radio stations, including some down in Fort Myers coming up in the next couple of weeks. By the way, Joe Lenardi right now has got the SEC 14 teams in, Big Tens right behind them with 10. Case, I wanted to ask you something relatively new if you're just coming to sport. Quad 1 and Quad 2 losses and wins. That seems to be the real parameter right now that everyone's using on whether you should be getting into the big dance or not. Do you like it? And when you're talking about handicapping, so much easier when you're talking about college football and pro football because you got a game once a week. And obviously you're talking about 12 to 14 games. Now all of a sudden you got 350 teams playing every Saturday. It's got to be really difficult. What do you like to handicap more?
Out of college basketball or college football?
Yeah.
I'd have to say results wise, college basketball. I feel like the market's a little bit more vulnerable. I'm still probably a little bit bigger football fan, and this past football season was unbelievable. But I think you go like the last 5 years, I've had a little more success basketball wise. So probably that. As far as like the quads, I don't that's all for someone else to figure out. To me, I am so singularly focused on betting these games and putting the right numbers on them that things like to get to the tournament and stuff, bracketology, just not really my expertise. I can give you a pretty good feeling on what the numbers should be on all the games and who's overachieved, who's underachieved, who I'm looking to buy and sell on. But I'm not great from the bracketology perspective.
We're recording this show here on Valentine's Day, so a day before that big number 1 versus number 2 matchup. What is that line on that Alabama-Auburn game tomorrow? And give us some other interesting matchups you see on that full slate of Saturday games that really piques your interest.
Yeah, for sure. So I made it. I did some work ahead of the show today. I did I usually line about 40 to 50 games on Saturday. So I did the first 20 last night. I did the SEC, Big 10, and Big 12. I was pretty sure what I was going to make this game all week, but I went through the whole math process too, just to make sure it's right. And I came out exactly what I thought. Alabama -1.5. It's a big enough game that we're seeing it posted at some sports books already. And of course, it's Alabama -1.5. I just think it's probably the right number. You can't convince me that Alabama is the better team, but like we said, big home court advantage, in college basketball. You got to adjust for that. So you make them.
So if this is at Auburn, they're 4 or 5.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Yeah, I would say, probably 4.5 for me. I am a little higher on Auburn in the way these home teams are taking money. I could more likely see myself being on Auburn here. Now, if at 1.5, I'd have to get to at least 3 for me to get involved. But I don't like the SEC home teams take money predominantly. So maybe some people are watching College Game Day. Some money flows in on Alabama. I could see me coming up with the buyback on Auburn. For Alabama, I'd probably need them to get to be like a 2-point underdog. And I don't see any scenario where that happens. It was interesting. Kai brought up the futures, which I haven't looked at in a long time, that they're not up anywhere this late in the season in Las Vegas. But I do see a big national sports book does have them up for all the conferences, including the SEC. Right now, they have Auburn -240, Alabama +220, Florida 12-1. Everyone else 60-1 or higher.
Wow.
This wasn't my own numbers, but I just crunched really quickly when Kai was doing it. What some like publicly available numbers would have out right now. And I came out to Florida at like 14-1. So at 20-1, which Kai said he found, I think that's a fine bet and something worth taking a flyer on. I'm riding Auburn from early in the year. I think in the non-conference, I gave out +350 on the starting lineup and I bet it myself. So I'm hoping they get it done. And I think there could be an opportunity here where if Alabama does win this home game, the odds are there's going to be about pick 'em between these two teams. And I would take Auburn in that scenario, really quickly looking over the schedule, as Kai talked about. I have Alabama by multiple sources here that I trust analytic wise, the toughest schedule in the nation remaining. So even if they get this big, great win against Auburn, Auburn's more, and it's still really tough. Auburn's got one of the tougher SEC schedules left. I have Florida as the weakest SEC schedule left, as Kai alluded to. But maybe if Alabama wins this game, you look to get in on Auburn. I'm guessing it'd be about a pick 'em. I still am not 100% sure. I'm ever so slightly leaning Auburn despite being on the road this weekend. Now, the other game that really stands out to me and ties along with these futures and things, we've got the number 1 team in the Big 12 going to the number 2 team in the Big 12, just like the SEC with Houston at Arizona. A little bit different situation because Houston is a 1.5-point favorite. It looks like open to me. I actually made this game Houston 3.5. So it's not posted in Vegas yet, but if it's still Houston -1.5, I'll probably bet that later today if we get that in Vegas. But that's another interesting one. Kind of the same situation. Houston -280 to win the Big 12 right now. Arizona +425. If Arizona beats them, I don't think Houston would quite get down to that like -110 range that I'm talking about. Maybe Auburn getting down if they lose, but I still think they might be like, in the -150 or something. And I really do think that the Cougars are head and shoulders the best team in the Big 12. I would put them pretty clearly the 3rd best team right now behind Auburn and Duke. So if you could get them lower too, that might be one worth looking to. I know everyone wants to take a shot on these futures and go for the long shot, and I get it. And I think there's a strong argument to be made early in the season. But this season, I feel like we have enough data. And to me, Houston and Iowa State are the class of the Big 12. Iowa State's already shot themselves in the foot a little too much. I don't see them making up. I think they have 3 games behind Houston right now. So maybe if Houston loses at Arizona, you could look to dip in and take them in the future as well.
Well, Kip, you were talking about yesterday as we recorded the show in the starting lineup too, man. It's almost easier to bet the coach than it is the team. When you're talking about, it really is. I mean, when you look at Bruce Pearl, I'm all over Bruce Pearl. You talk about Kelvin Sampson when he's done it. What he's done just to Houston, it's unbelievable. And I hate to do that, but normally it's the last thing you look at. In college hoops, it's usually the first thing I look at. I look at the college coach, how they provide in the past, and what they do with their basketball team. Nate Oates and Bruce Pearl, who's got the upper hand in the game?
I don't know. I would say just a knee-jerk reaction. Bruce Pearl. I think Nate Oates is.
Your son's going crazy, by the way.
Well, I think Bruce Pearl's a great recruiter, great program builder. If you're giving me basketball X's and O's, I mean,
that wasn't the question. Who has the edge in this game? I like the mental state of Auburn. I think they're a more stable situation right now than Alabama. Alabama is kind of all over the place. And maybe I'm reading too much. That just meltdown against Arkansas the other day was just inexcusable. Yeah. I mean, they just played like they're on a playground. And it was almost time to go home at 6:00. I mean, Arkansas is not a very gifted offensive team, and Alabama let them go on a 17-0 run or something ridiculous. So my response was, for this particular matchup, I just like where Bruce Pearl has Auburn positioned right now psychologically. I picked Alabama to win the game. I think Nate Oates is potentially the best coach in the country, but I still think maybe it's there, and I don't know how to articulate this, but I think Alabama's a little bit more of a loose cannon team than Auburn, who seems like a little more buttoned down and professional to me. That's all I was trying to say. Right or wrong.
Yeah. Any other particular games on Saturday? Because we mentioned almost every Saturday seems like there's just a huge SEC matchup, but we'll go with Kip first and then we'll hit Kyle. Any other particular games that are really sticking out to you? I know you were kind of talking about South Carolina. There's no easy out in the SEC.
No, I've been talking about Georgia being phony all year. It's a typical Georgia team, really athletic, physical, but they don't anybody can really score or handle the ball. They're never going to win on the road. They're at home against Missouri, which I think is a fascinating game. I don't have any idea what the line's going to be, but I think Georgia is going to get a lot of credit for being a somewhat successful home team so far this year. They've had a couple of big wins, particularly over Kentucky, but I think this is a real measuring stick for Missouri, who I think is a really good team. They went blow for blow with Texas A&M last Saturday and lost their first game in Columbia all season. I don't know what that number is going to be, but I kind of think Georgia's going the wrong way. They led Texas A&M by 8 or 9 points at halftime in their game Tuesday night and ended up getting beat by 100. The second half was just an absolute mismatch. So I think the Georgia spark has come and gone. I don't know what that number is going to be, but I'm kind of intrigued with Missouri in that matchup in the SEC this week. And I don't know how big a spread it's going to be in the Vanderbilt-Tennessee game, but Tennessee's coming off 2 dismal performances and really is the team in the league that really needs to win this week. If that line's not too outrageous, I think they'll take care of the Commodores. They pulled away and beat them pretty easily in Nashville, but I think Tennessee's got to have it this weekend. So if that line's not too outrageous, I really like the Volunteers.
What is that line, Case? Do you know?
That's not up yet. Only the big games. Just so I didn't do my work in vain, I'll read you my SEC numbers right now. Yeah. You guys can bet based on this. And by the way, I'm just a huge Nate Oates homer. I think the world of him.
Oh, I think Nate Oates is awesome.
I'm not invalidating Kip's points at all. I just I was very happy when he didn't have. I was very happy when he didn't immediately say Bruce Pearl. Like I thought a lot of people was thinking about it, but Nate Oates' philosophy to me is what I would want out of coach. Get the best players you can and build around them.
You do root for Bruce Pearl.
My Nick Saban argument, though.
Yeah.
You just took my Nick Saban argument that I've made for the last 15 years when everybody said he's the greatest coach in college football. And I said, no, he's the greatest recruiter in college football. If he was the greatest coach in college football with the group he always had, where until the last year of his career, he had the absolute best roster on the field every single game. How did he not win 15 national championships? Because he wasn't the greatest coach. He was.
I don't see that with.
And you just argued the exact same thing against Bruce Pearl.
No, you didn't let me finish. I don't see that at all with Nate Oates. I don't think he has the best players on the floor every game. I say get the best players you can and build around them. At Buffalo, did he have the best players on the court?
No.
And guess what? He got a bunch of these funky kids that play defense. They went and beat DeAndre Ayton and all these.
No, you said it
draft
against
picks.
Bruce Pearl.
Now all of a sudden he can't coach defense. No, it's because he gets the best players he can. Now he has the best players that can shoot and play offense. And he brought Alabama to a Final Four. When I was growing up, if you told me down there Alabama was going to go to a Final Four, people would laugh at you.
Yeah.
I feel he's done it every possible way, and their shooting metrics are incredible. He has them take high-level shots. Yeah, they are kind of spazzy this year. They can let big leads get away, but I really think that's a testament to he's done it in all different ways. Stylistically, you look at his career, there's different teams every year. One year, 2021, they were the number 3 team in the nation in defensive efficiency because they didn't have the shooters they had now. I think the world of Nate Oates, and you're not going to.
No. I said you argued it against Bruce Pearl.
Yeah.
You said he was a great recruiter. I'm not disagreeing. I don't think Nate Oates coaches defense really well. Don't get me wrong. And I did not say Bruce Pearl was a better coach. Cuckoo did. So that's just completely different. But I'm just saying you can go back from that. But before you give your numbers, let's think about this. You got 9 games, top 25 on the road this weekend. But like we talked about, but how big are some of these games going to be? I mean, because in Sunday, Memphis at Wichita State, Michigan at Ohio State, those are going to be 2 favored road teams. I'm going to be interested to see the Houston-Arizona line. I would absolutely jump on it also at 1.5. But Texas Tech is going to be favored at Oklahoma State. I think Missouri is going to be favored at Georgia, probably by 3.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
4. Clemson's going to be favored at Florida State. Michigan State probably going to be favored at Illinois, although that may be 1.5 for Illinois, maybe.
You're not your head case now.
If Illinois is minus 1.5, I'll make the biggest bet of the year on Illinois. I have Illinois 5.5 in that game. Okay. But I agree with everyone else Kai said. Okay.
And then Kansas, Utah. Kansas is going to be favored.
What other lines do you have, Case?
Okay, yeah, sorry. I just having betting both men, I will tell you this: a lot more people root for Bruce than they do with Nate because Nate comes across as an asshole, and Bruce's charisma just oozes out of him, whether he's got a shirt on or not. Go ahead and give me some more numbers. So I got Texas A&M minus 8.5 hosting Arkansas. Tennessee, I have a 12-point favorite hosting Vanderbilt. We're right on line with this one. I have Georgia, a 2.5-point dog against Missouri. Alabama, 1.5. We already talked about. Ole Miss, 4.5-point favorite against Mississippi State. Oklahoma, 7 hosting LSU. And Texas, -2 against Kentucky. Florida, -15 against South Carolina. That's that's my SEC rundown for tomorrow.
Yeah, Ole Miss,
that's pretty good with knowing Condon's out.
Yeah.
Florida.
Ole Miss, Mississippi State's an interesting game because nobody's really thinking about that, of course, with all the premier games. But that's number 19 against number 22. Those are teams that are very significant in this whole discussion. They played in Starkville, of course, earlier this year. Mississippi State actually won that game, but didn't cover. I think they were a 5.5-point favorite, and they won by 3 or 4. But Ole Miss, to me, is one of the biggest surprises in the league, and I'd just be interested to hear what you guys' opinion on that. I think Ole Miss probably waxes them. Mississippi State won at Georgia last weekend, but I don't think really talent-wise that they're that good a team. I think Ole Miss might be a really good play this weekend.
Case, your thoughts?
I think you're going to have the same thing in that game, Ole Miss, as I do Auburn, Alabama. I think Ole Miss's guards are going to outplay Mississippi State's guards. I 1,000% believe Alabama's guards are better than Auburn's guards. And I think, if Bruce Pearl tries to go with 2 big men and play Caldwell and Broome like he did the other night, they had to get away from Caldwell in order to pull away from Vandy. When he went back to 2 big men, Vandy went small and they were scrapping. And that's the reason why Vandy was ahead most of the time. I feel like Bruce Pearl almost got out coached in that game. And maybe he woke up, there later, but I don't know I don't remember what he said his Ole Miss Mississippi State line was. If it's anything less than 5, I would probably pounce on Ole Miss in that game. But I think one of my favorite plays of the weekend is going to be Alabama at home. I know Case said, it got 3.5. He'd have to go the other way. I think Alabama is probably going to end up with a relatively easy win.
Wow.
In that game. I can see it anywhere from 6 to 10 points.
All right, Case.
And I think they hit 90 again.
Case, your final thoughts?
I can see there being a case for Alabama if you weight the recency higher. I mean, they've been playing great lately. I feel like they're kind of running hot. I mean, a lot of this in college basketball is handicapping. It's stupid. It's a cliche, but it's a make or miss game. And right now, I always have Bill Self in the back of my mind. If they were taking on a team that shot like just out the wazoo for the last few games, they've used all their makes. To me, it kind of seems like Alabama's used a lot of their makes lately. I talked about the way they built this team. It is a high variance style. I feel like they're going to have one of these games where they're going to have to grit it out. And it seems like one's coming up. If that's against Auburn, I like Auburn there. But at 1.5, no play. I was kind of leaning the other way on Ole Miss, on Mississippi State, as uncomfortable as it is. I actually adjusted this quite a bit. I think just raw numbers, I came out like 6 Ole Miss. I have it 4.5. You look at some of these same metrics I was talking about. Ole Miss, they don't really take a lot of great shots. They take a lot of mid-range, dribble around, take a fadeaway hand in your face, and they're just making a lot of them right now. Mississippi State, on the other hand, I feel like had a lot of bad luck. As much as I dislike this team and I bet against them a lot, so if it is like 6, I think 6 is my target point there. I actually think I would be on Mississippi State. Of course, talk about how great the home court is, and now I'm like liking all the road teams. And I will say I did adjust. Kai mentioned the Florida number, all the guys they have out. I did adjust for that. I came out like Florida minus 18 just without any injuries, and I took off 3 points with them. I mean, they're going to have 2 starters out, and Clayton's still a little beat up too. So I still came to 15. I think South Carolina's right there with LSU in terms of
they've been bad on the road. They have been bad.
All right, K4Wins.com, K4Wins.com, free site. Check it out. You can go there and subscribe. We do our show every single week, and of course, we're going to have some more details as we get ready for March Madness. We're 2/3 of the way all the way home, guys. Thank you so much. Until next week.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.